Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Good morning, dear participants, dear delegates, dear presenters, dear UNECE delegates. It is a great pleasure for me to chair this webinar today. And let me introduce myself. I am Chrissy Potsiou, professor at the National Technical University of Athens, member of the WPLA Bureau, and honorary president of the International Federation of Surveyors. Let me share my presentation. Okay. Is it okay, Vahid? Can you see?
If you full screen, yes. Now it's perfect.
Okay, good. So today's webinar is titled Informal Settlements, Formalization and Build Back Better Projects. And the purpose is to support the implementation of the UNECE guidelines for formalization and the implementation of COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan for informal settlements in the ECE region. In particular, the purpose of this webinar is to gather experts to review the progress made in formalization projects and in Build Back Better initiatives for informal settlements in our region, to share experiences, to explore solutions and ways to overcome remaining challenges in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, with particular focus on SDG 11, on making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The webinar is divided into two parts. This first part, apart from the introduction section, will present also two case studies, one from Albania and one from Greece. The second part, in the afternoon, will present case studies from Kyrgyzstan, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. Each part will include a question and answer session and open discussions. Let me give you some background information. Since 2007, UNECE, together with the International Federation of Surveyors, have addressed the field of informal settlements in southern and eastern parts of our region. It was then estimated that more than 50 million people lived in informal settlements in 20 UNECE member states. And pre-existing challenges and new challenges introduced by COVID have been investigated together with solutions. We understood pretty soon that the country's preparedness against disasters can make all the difference. So far, we have made the collective effort, and we have, together with all of you, we have presented and published several publications. Some of them are mentioned here: the Self-Made Cities in 2009, the Formalizing the Informal in 2015, the guidelines in 2019, and the Recovery Action Plan in 2022. And we also provided additional supporting material that will help better understanding and implementation of both the guidelines and the Recovery Action Plan. And also we have made available e-courses, and you can see here, if you want to access the e-courses, the e-learning courses, you can see here the site. More specifically, by 2009, it was identified that informal settlements, depending on the case, had dense populations, usually limited services such as water supply and sanitation, inadequate transport, unregistered residents, inadequate housing, informal and unregistered constructions and informal markets, and residents had generally insecure tenure, unregistered land rights, limited access to credit and funding, lower incomes, and in the most intense situations, they often had few resources, precarious employment, limited digital connectivity, and included many of society's most vulnerable people. So the importance of tackling this issue was undeniable. By 2015, several member states have already initiated formalization and Build Back Better projects. So we have published the second publication you can see here above, Formalizing the Informal, where we provided examples of the ongoing formalization projects, some brief assessment of those projects in 5 countries in our region. In parallel, at this time, by 2015, the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 was published, and the issue has been addressed in several United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, SDG Target 1.4 stresses that governments should ensure that all men and women, particularly the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land, and other forms of property and inheritance. And please let me notice here that this is the first time in history that all member states of United Nations have agreed to include also ownership and control over land there. Then SDG 11 stresses that cities and human settlements should be inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Based on lessons learned from the various projects, in 2019, UNECE prepared and published the guidelines for formalization of informal constructions in an effort to provide general guidance for formalization projects in countries facing the challenge of informal development and to contribute to the formulation, implementation and monitoring of an appropriate land policy in the region that will promote sustainable land management to more readily achieve the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. Here you can see briefly the plan of the structure of the formalization process. You can see that one part, the first part is how to prepare the strategy. We provide information how to build political will, how to analyze informalities, how to carry out cost-benefit analysis study, how to agree on a fit-for-purpose strategy. This is very important topic. How to develop the communication plan, the draft of a strategy report, and how to get the approval from government. And then the next part is information how to prepare the framework for formalization, how to define the areas, the categories of constructions, that can be formalized, how to determine the legal and regulatory issues, the appropriate actions for formalization, how to define the registration process, how to decide the draft the formalization process, how to define the penalties and fees, how to determine the involved institutions, all the administrative, legal, technical aspects. And then it comes the next part where we provide information how to formalize actually the constructions, how to prepare the inventory, technical issues, how to accept the and process the submitted documents, how to register informal constructions, how to impose legal actions as required, how to monitor. And of course, we have the last part where we provide information about the actions that need to be taken following formalization, how to improve in general the geospatial data ecosystems, all the registers, the land administration registers, the planning procedures, taxation, valuation, affordable housing policies and practices. In general, how to improve the whole infrastructure so that we will ensure resilience and we will avoid the extension of this phenomenon in future. And here you can see also in more detail about information about the long-term building back better. That also includes improvements in developing all these, the whole ecosystem that includes property registration planning, affordable housing valuation, etc., as I mentioned. Now, in 2019, the pandemic came along and has created new challenges and also and reinforced the pre-existing obstacles to realizing the Sustainable Development Goals, such as structural inequalities, socioeconomic gaps, and systemic challenges and risks and significant delays. So by 2022, UNECE published the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan for informal settlements in the UNECE region in an effort to propose measures to deal with the new pandemic-based challenges and the pre-existing ones as well. This Recovery Action Plan targets national and local governments in the UNECE region and provides an extensive list of goals, targets, and actions that need to be taken. These can be advanced by governments, local authorities, residents, community leaders, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to help mitigate or prevent the pandemic spread, but also to build back better the self-made cities by achieving greater resilience in future. And let me remind you a little bit what is the general setup. Here you can see we have the guidelines for formalization. I remind you that informal constructions are defined as unauthorized constructions, not registered, not marketable. And we have the guidelines for formalization. And here we have the Recovery Action Plan for build back better, to build back better informal settlements. And we believe that by reading these two publications, the local experts may be enabled to prepare the local recovery action plan for building back better. And let me explain a little bit the term build back better refers to a strategy aimed at reducing the risk to the people of nations and communities in the wake of future disasters and shocks. And it was first introduced by US President Bill Clinton in 2005 after the tsunami as a post-disaster recovery. As such, we consider the pandemic COVID-19 as a disaster, global disaster, which may occur again anytime in future by any reason, not as a disease, or it could be another type of disaster that people would need to address timely to have as less impact as possible. So it is good that we will take advantage of all the experience and the legacy that we have from this COVID-19 disaster in order to be better organized and to be able to prepare the local recovery action plans for our urban areas and particularly for the informal settlements that are in bigger risk. So here again, you can see the structure. We have a specific presentation later on by Stephen Nystrom that will explain better. But here I can show you that we have the guidelines again and the recovery action plan. It is here. The guidelines are here. The recovery action plan is here. And we have also policy briefs about specific topics, food, nature-based solutions, PPPs and innovative financing, water and sanitation, energy and building standards, etc. That is additional material that you may have a look and study. And also have some examples about city assessment reports on COVID-19. And other reference materials, as I mentioned earlier, the online lectures. And you can be then ready so that you will prepare the local recovery action plan. I know that many of countries have been working on the guidelines and the implementation of guidelines and the recovery action plan. And this is actually the purpose that we are here to exchange experience and ideas. So the plan, the recovery action plan identifies 9 policy areas, and there are goals, targets, and actions that need to be taken so that we will have a successful response. An appropriate local implementation should vary in timing, priority, and scope based on the physical and social realities in the communities, in each community. So the regional action plan distinguishes different goals: immediate emergency focused goals, short-term emergency related goals, intermediate term goals, blending resilience and emergency goals, or long-term resilience focused goals. And the concept is that the formalization projects and the recovery action plans may and it is advisable that should be implemented in parallel. So you see here how we implement the formalization, and in parallel, when, for example, we are preparing for the strategy for formalization, we can also start preparing for a local a recovery action plan, a build back better plan, and see how we can prioritize the actions, specific cost-benefit analysis. Again, it is important to agree on a fit-for-purpose strategy, to prepare also communication plans, strategy report, and etc., to get approval for the recovery action plan. And again, when we prepare the framework for formalization, we can also have in mind that pretty soon or in parallel, we can start preparing also the framework for the recovery action plan. That may include also the definition of the risk in each of the various legalization zones, and what are the risks and how big are the risks, and to list all necessary measures and actions that need to be taken in order to prepare the Build Back Better plan, to define the legal and regulatory issues, to allow urgent short, mid, and long-term measures and interventions, to define the appropriate implementation actions and administrative procedures, the roles, the responsibilities, to establish an emergency operations center in the municipality, to think about and plan very well about the funding so that the recovery action plan will be actually successfully implemented, to define the levels and penalties also involved and also the involved institutions, and then how we actually do the formalization. Again, in parallel, how to think, how to plan, how to actually implement this recovery action plan. Let me now show you a little bit in brief, to remind you a little bit in brief, why we say that it is important to implement both the formalization and the recovery action plan, and to build experience on that. It is because the social value of those two is very important. Providing clear, fair, affordable, and transparent title issuing titles and registration may improve security of tenure against land grabbing and evictions, and especially against market pressure. May improve living conditions, may create marketable property units, may minimize lending risks, and may enable funding improvements. And also may provide a geospatial data infrastructure, which is very important for evidence-based good governance, provision of humanitarian support, and preparing the local action plan for disasters or for pandemic, etc. It is really important that this geospatial data infrastructure to be there and ready in place so that we will be ready for facing any kind of disaster. And then also it may increase public trust, because existing informal rights should be recognized and then legalized prior to any necessary land reforms for upgrading and improving the informal settlements, maybe also for resettlement if needed, and for implementing planning. And residents, when are fairly treated, are more likely to support the reforms. So this is also an important topic that we need to have in mind. Also may raise awareness about community engagement and participation, which is another topic that we have to keep in mind, because all what we are trying to do, the implementation of any kind of land management project, is very much based on the community engagement and participation in order to be successful. And also may increase resilience and tenure security against future disaster and climate change, and SDG achievements for a more just, equitable, and sustainable future. So, as I said, this is like a reunion for all experts that have so far contributed, and for new experts that they are interested to contribute on this topic of addressing informal settlements in our region. And together we can go further, and we can go ahead and assess our project and see how we can provide new knowledge so that we go forward. And we should unblock the complex situations in formalization and building back better. So let us say that we commit together that we will work for a whole year thinking about that and assessing our projects, and continue to implement the guidelines and the recovery action plan, so that next year we will meet together in our WPLA workshop that is planned to be held on the 18th to 20th of June 2025 in Athens, Greece. And this will be a joint UNECE WPLA, FIG, Commission 3 and Commission 9, a European group of surveyors, and a World Bank conference on Build Back Better the Self-Made Cities, improving the geospatial data ecosystems, and formalizing the informal settlements. And the list of topics may include the following and more, as together we will identify through the whole year ahead of us. So let me mention some of them. To provide information about monitoring the formalization progress in the various member states, to provide information and experience about formalization of rights, land rights, of legislation improvements, of the progress of registration, the procedures and costs and times that we have achieved, to provide statistics, to show a good experience how we managed to improve tenure security, for the implementation of Build Back Better projects and the recovery action plan, how we provide services and infrastructure in a modern way and fit for purpose way, how do we manage to improve the geospatial data ecosystems and the legal frameworks, and how we can improve the organization of sales market, rental market, the taxation system, valuation system, planning and permitting system, etc., in the self-made cities. Also, it is important to see and monitor our progress in the field of community engagement, and to provide good practices in our region, and to prepare the local recovery action plans and provide examples, and how we can manage to raise resilience against disasters and future pandemics in general. So this was my presentation, and I have now to how to stop sharing. Okay, and I have to give the floor to the head of the land management unit of UNECE, Tia, to explain to you how this webinar and how what we plan to do from now on until next year fits with the work of the UNECE and the relevant activities. And Tia, thank you for coming, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chrissy, and good morning, dear participants. I'm really pleased to welcome you also from the side of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, to today's meeting on informal settlements to discuss the related challenges and solutions. So many thanks to the Bureau of the Working Party on Land Administration, and in particular Chrissy, for organizing this meeting. So I said I'm Tea Aulavua. I'm the head of the Housing and Land Management Unit in UNECE, and so I'm replacing this morning the director of the Forest, Land and Housing Division, Paula Deda, whom you see still on the program, but who unfortunately could not attend this morning. So as we have heard this morning from Chrissy, informal settlements are areas with unauthorized housing, lacking legal land tenure, proper planning, and essential services. And they often result from a rapid urbanization, insufficient affordable housing, and they pose significant challenges for sustainable urban development and policy integration. So they are a pressing issue that affect millions of people globally, particularly in rapidly urbanizing areas. And so therefore UNECE has been actively working to address these challenges in its member states through various initiatives and collaborations. UNECE addresses informal settlements in a multifaceted way that involves policy development, research, and also practical capacity building projects and training. So we remain committed to supporting governments and communities in transforming informal settlements into sustainable, livable spaces. Chrissy already referred to the 2 e-learning courses on informal settlements with her as a lecturer. And these are available on the UNECE website. You saw the link, and it's available on the slides of Chrissy. And also it's good to know that they are available not only in English, but also in Russian. So we encourage you very much to take these courses if you have not yet done so, and also to inform others about them. And in addition, we've had these webinars recently this year, and you may access their recordings. The recordings are available also from our website if you didn't have the chance to attend them. And we lastly also heard about the joint conference to be held in Greece in 18th to 20th of June next year. So please save the date, and you are most welcome to attend it. We also heard much about the guidelines already for the formalization and informal settlements and the recovery action plan that Chrissy referred to, and which Stephen Nystrom will soon be presenting to you in more detail. So in my presentation, I mean, I don't have slides, but I will just briefly summarize the technical assistance and the pilot project of UNECE in the field of informal settlements, and also our approach to informal settlements. which focuses on formalizing them in a manner that is affordable, reliable, inclusive, and timely. And this involves integrating informal settlements into the formal land market, which provides the economic, social, and environmental benefits. And the approach involves comprehensive formalization and market integration. Informal construction should be formalized to enhance tenure, security, facilitate access to credit and investment, and integrate informal parcels into the legal land market to boost property values and economic viability. Informal settlements also should be upgraded to ensure dignified living conditions and essential services, while encouraging collaboration between national and local authorities, and with input from residents for effective planning and funding. And lastly, the last approach is preparation, public trust, and participation. It's really important to conduct preparatory analysis to assess informality and to gain political and community support, so that to foster public understanding of the issue and public participation, and to secure ownership rights and minimize conflicts. Now, our technical assistance and pilot projects have focused on developing policy and legal frameworks to formalize these informal settlements, improving basic infrastructure like water, sanitation, and roads, and engaging local community in planning. And this work also has aimed to facilitate economic integration by providing access to credit, creating policies that support long-term sustainability of these formalized settlements once they are formalized. So I'll give you a list of examples of what our work has consisted of. For the city of Kharkiv in Ukraine, UNECE developed a master plan to integrate informal settlements into the formal urban network. This involved upgrading infrastructure, revitalizing heritage sites, and improving housing, aiming to enhance urban resilience and economic viability. In the Western Balkans, UNECE implemented guidelines for formalizing informal settlements, focusing on legal frameworks and infrastructure improvements. And the project aimed to legally integrate informal constructions, improve living conditions, and economic opportunities. Then UNECE's slum upgrading initiatives in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, involved developing housing projects, engaging communities, and reforming legal frameworks. The project improved infrastructure again and living standards while providing greater tenure security for residents. In Central Asia, UNECE addressed informal settlements through their integration into formal housing strategies. This was done through pilot projects and policy development, which enhanced residents' access to services, their legal rights, and economic opportunities. Then in Albania, UNECE's project focused on legalizing and upgrading informal housing, providing residents with legal tenure and improved infrastructure, and it enhanced property rights and living conditions for those living in formal settlements. Then in Minsk, Belarus, UNECE piloted urban resilience strategies for informal settlements involving infrastructure development and housing upgrades. The project aimed at integrating informal areas into the formal market, enhancing their resilience and sustainability. Then in the city of Novi Sad in Serbia, UNECE worked on regularizing informal settlements by creating legal frameworks, upgrading housing and infrastructure. And again, the project provided for more secure tenure and better living conditions. And lastly, in Tbilisi, Georgia, UNECE's pilot project focused on again, formalizing informal settlements, integrating them into a formal housing market through policy development, legal reforms, community-based upgrades to improve the infrastructure and legal status of residents. So as you can see, a lot has been done for this very challenging issue in the UNECE region. And to conclude, I can only stress the complexity of the issues surrounding informal settlements, and therefore the importance of a very comprehensive, inclusive and participatory approach to addressing these challenges. And UNECE really calls on all stakeholders, including national and local governments, NGOs and the private sector to actively collaborate to tackle these complex issues. So I look very much forward to the informative presentations on the program today and the fruitful discussions, and I invite also participants to take part in these discussions. We wish to hear from you, the participants, and you may wish to share your experiences and your insights during this question and answer session later on. So thank you very much. Over to you, Chrissy.
Thank you very much, Tia, for all this interesting review of UNECE contributions. And now I will give the floor to Pilar, who is a registrar of the property of Paterna in Valencia, and she is the WPLA Vice Chair. And Pilar will explain to us what we are doing now in this seminar and in the coming year, how this will fit with the work of WPLA and the study on ecosystem and security in land administration. So Pilar, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chrissy. Good morning, and thank you so much for organizing this great webinar. So I'm going to share my presentation. You can see it right now, right? So first of all, I'm going to talk, as Chrissy said, about the Working Party and Land Administration and how this webinar is included in our program of work. So first of all, I would like to say that the Working Party and Land Administration is part of the UNECE Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management, which we've been hearing about. So this committee, as we've seen, works to promote affordable, adequate and climate neutral housing, also compact, inclusive, circular, resilient and smart cities, transparent and efficient land use and property registration. And its work is based on the Geneva UN Charter on Sustainable Housing and also on the Regional Action Plan 2030 for Place and Life in the EC region. So inside this committee, we have our Working Party and Land Administration. This working party works to improve land administration and management in the UNECE region, enhancing security of tenure and promoting sustainable land use. We also focus on modernizing land administration system. We support policy formulation, and we ensure effective management and use of geospatial and real property data. And we also foster the collaboration through seminars, workshops, studies that we will see afterwards. And we try to provide expert advice to promote the best practices and policy development. As for our bureau, we have our chair, who's Ms. Victoria Abbott. We have two vice chairs, apart from me, also Ms. Kirsi Karekinen, and also our other member is Ms. Chrissy Potsu, who's today leading this great webinar. So how do we work? What do we do to promote, to gain these aims that we've seen before? We organize workshops in the EC region, in person and online. So we are able to allow for experience and knowledge sharing, best practices for improving land administration and management. We promote the work of the Working Party and provide advice and land administration at different workshops, conferences, webinars, and so on, not only the ones organized by ourselves, but also organized by other organizations or through the United Nations channels. We also provide policy advice to national and local governments for land administration resilience. We also contribute, as requested, to the discussions of the Committee on Urban Development and Land Management, also to the Real Estate Market Advisory Group, also for the United Nations Committee on Geospatial Information Management. And also we work on what we call land reviews or country profiles, in which we review housing policies of a certain country at a national level. And we try to provide or to provide our advice on the best practices for improving land administration in a certain country. As for our current program of work, in which this webinar is included, it was agreed on our 13th session, which was held on April 4 to 5 to 5th, 2023 in Geneva. Here we identified as our main topics for our global trends for the following years: ecosystem challenges and security, the impact of accelerated digitalization, the future role of land administration in sustainable development, and the property rights security. Based on all of these themes, we developed a program of work, and we organized a series of webinars and workshops which we've been celebrating, and we are still celebrating as the one today. So as for the most recent webinars, we had a webinar on cybersecurity, of the challenges of cybersecurity in digital land administration. We celebrated two of them, one in April and another one in February, one of them together with the Real Estate Market Advisory Group. We also celebrated a webinar on ecosystems in land administration and about how our land and cadastral authorities working with new ecosystems in land administration, which are celebrated in April. And we've got today's webinar, which obviously is the most recent one, on informal settlements. I must also refer to past webinars to explain you the study that we were developing. We had some past webinars the previous years about cadastral mapping, about data interoperability, benefits and challenges of open data, the socioeconomic benefits of geospatial information, and also about advanced education and competence needs also in geospatial information. We've also celebrated an in-person workshop in Madrid this November, which was about ensuring tenure security after natural and man-made disasters, whose aim was talking about securing land and housing tenure after natural and man-made disasters. We gathered many countries and also many specialists. We tried to identify the main challenges that this kind of disasters provoke, and in which informal settlements were identified as one of the challenges that have to be faced after one of these type of disasters. We also had the intervention of a delegation of Ukraine, which was integrated in the UN for Ukrainian Cities project, which was referred to before by Tia. So we were able to discuss and focus in some of the challenges that tenure security is facing right now. And as said, one of them was informal settlements. So out of these webinars and workshops we've been celebrating, and we are celebrating, we were developing the called studies on ecosystem and security in land administration. It's got two parts, as the name says, one on ecosystems in land administration, proposing initiatives that aim to strengthen land administration through strategic, transparent, cooperative frameworks that align with the 2030 agenda, trying to enhance security, efficiency, and sustainability in managing land rights and responsibilities. And another part focusing on security and land administration, divided into data security, tenure security, system security, and cybersecurity. So going a bit in depth on this study, We have, as said, a first part talking about ecosystems in land administration. As said in our 13th session, the WPLA Bureau highlighted ecosystems and security as a key areas. And we identified some guiding principles for strengthening these ecosystems in land administration, such as strategic enablement, transparent and accountable, reliable, accessible and usable, collaboration and cooperation, integrated solutions, sustainable and valued, leadership and commitment. We've identified that there's a growing and multifaceted interplay between the land administration and the social, economic, and environmental well-being of citizens and societies. And this is driven by global megatrends. So these global megatrends, or these catalyzers of the future of land administrations, are such as urbanization, climate change, digital transformation, data revolution, and distributed networks and front-edge technologies. So these were identified in the called scenario study on future land administration in the UNECE region, which was also developed by the WPLA in the past term. And this interplay between these different factors is also amplified by some national factors, such as the emerging needs, expectations of citizens and society, and also the reduced government spending on public services. So this combined with the cross-natural sector or nature of land administration have risen to the formation of new ecosystems and collaborations between the different actors and the different institutions that are part of land administration. We identified that this new public-private partnership arrangements, new online public services, such as government platform approaches, and also interoperability solutions. So we think that it's important to investigate these new formations to identify some common aspects. And these aspects are crucial for national policies and regional cooperation agreements and for fostering global awareness. So this study, on this first part of this study, we try to identify these new formations, these issues, and to provide recommendations for supporting national and regional policies and initiatives in this area for land administration. And the second part of this publication is going to be focused on security in land administration. So as we think that land administration authorities are in process of modernizing their systems or are considering to do so, digital transformation is raising numerous security concerns. We've identified different levels, security regarding individual citizens, security regarding land administration systems, and security related to the society, region, or nation. So these three levels involve different, albeit partly overlapping aspects, including tenure security, data security, and system security and cybersecurity. So this part of the publication involves this first part on tenure security. This part is based, as said, on the workshop we celebrated, which I explained previously, also in the geospatial information webinars that we've been talking about. We've identified different aspects of tenure security, some legal aspects in which we examine how these natural man-made disasters are challenging tenure security and how the different institutions are facing them. Also the interplay between the legal information and the geospatial information, and how is it important to include geospatial information to prevent or to make better tenure security. And also we've identified the main challenges that tenure security is facing right now, having them as a digitalization, as natural man-made disasters, informal settlements, where we will include the conclusions to which we get today, and in which we will work further on this set or presented workshop that will be celebrated next year in Athens. We will also include some of the conclusions we got in our workshop. Well, we have well representation of the Albania case, of the Greek case, and of some cases on Ibero-America as well. And then also and the theme on building resilient cities. We also examine the current concern of cybersecurity together with the real estate market advisory group, the main threats that citizen security is facing, studying some case studies such as the Cyprus bridge, which was explained in this webinar by one of their representatives, and also some cases of other countries that such as Finland or Spain that have some ways to prevent breaches in system security, and also a part on data security, talking about the hot topic of open data versus data privacy. So with this, we wanted to put the framework of the webinar we are celebrating today, which is informal settlements, and how is it included in our program of work, how we find it as something really important and something to really take into account and to study and go further, as we can see that all of the challenges that land administration is facing right now also lead to face this problem over and over again in the different countries. So about all of this information and all of these webinars and workshops that I've been talking about, and also about the publication that we are developing and that will be published next year, you can access to them in all of our links, our social media, and also in our webpage, which where everything is uploaded and it's recorded, so that you can go further in any of the activities I've been talking about. So I will now stop sharing the screen to come back to you. And so thank you for listening to the work that the Working Party Land Administration is developing. I really wish for a really successful webinar today, where we will get, I'm sure, really great conclusions to get a great part on our publication. Thank you, Chrissy, again.
Thank you very much, Pilar, for this interesting description of the work of WPLA these years. And now I will give the floor to Stephen Nystrom from a new stream companies USA. Stephen is long active in the International Federation of Surveyors. He was the chair of Commission 9, and he continues to be active in FIG and WPLA. And he will talk in more detail about the guidelines and the recovery action plan that we are all trying to implement, all those that are facing the problem of informal settlements in our places. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chrissy. Let me get the sharing going here. So bear with me 1 second. All right, can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, good morning. It's bright and early here in Florida, and I am going to talk to you today about the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan and the guidelines for formalization. There were three main authors. We did have some other experts along the way. Myself, Stephen Nystrom, Chrissy Pazio, and Rick Borders. This presentation probably won't take that long, because apparently Chrissy and I had a very similar slide setup and very similar discussion. So I'll try to give a little bit of a different focus, but we both pretty much covered both of the publications. And so I do apologize for some duplication. Like I said, I'll try to add a little different focus as we go along, and don't be surprised if you see a few of the same slides. Okay, the general setup of this particular PowerPoint will be a discussion of the Recovery Action Plan first, followed by a discussion of the guidelines for formalization and the formalization process, and where does that process for formalization fit within the Recovery Action Plan. Lastly, I'll be talking about how to tune or adapt the concepts in both publications towards other land-related problem solutions, and how to maybe adjust the focus a little bit as necessary for resilience and building back better. Okay, so you'll see this slide looks a lot like Chrissy's did. On the left, you've got the guidelines for formalization. On the right, you have the recovery action plan, and both of them are the recovery action plan is sort of the broad overhang. Guidelines for formalization is a very important key component within policy area 1 within the recovery action plan, but both of them feed into what the most important part, which would be the local recovery action plan for building back better, resilience, and pandemic mitigation within informal settlements. And that's how they fit together, with the recovery action plan being much broader and the guidelines for formalization focusing mostly on policy area 1 and 9 of the 9 policy areas. Okay, so another way to look at this is you'll see that the central goal is that in orange there, the local recovery action plan, and you'll see the 2 main publications, first the recovery action plan at the top and the guidelines for formalization there at the bottom. So I'm going to start with the overarching one, the recovery action plan. It was focused on COVID-19. It does also work with a focus on other resilience-based problems and can be tuned for others, but it is focused on pandemic response within informal settlements. There were 6 other publications planned. I believe at least 4 of them got published by other UN groups on various policy concepts within that are covered heavily within the recovery action plan. They were writing those the same time I was writing the recovery action plan, and we were writing the recovery action plan. And most of the concepts are very, I fed information to them, they fed information to me. We agree on almost everything, and they're very complementary. So, so we have these other policy briefs feeding into the recovery action plan for pandemic mitigation and recovery, as well as the guidelines for formalization for the specific addressment of the formalization of those informal settlements, which starts removing the problem and brings those informal settlements within the broader land markets. None of that is terribly important without the city assessments down there in the bottom left, which talk about the very specific aspects related to the city itself. Every informal settlement, every region is going to have different aspects and different foci that need to be taken into account to appropriately assess the problem and to respond to it with the correct local recovery action plan that is specific to that community. Several parties here have already mentioned there are other reference materials we made with Matteo. We made some webinars and some online lectures. All the authors did. And those are all, I'll give you links to those. I think you've seen links before. I'll give you more links later. Okay, so we're going to start off with a quick discussion of the recovery action plan itself. As I said before, there are 9 broad policy areas, and you can see these are all key components, certainly for the structure of a action plan to mitigate a pandemic response. That was the focus of the recovery action plan, and still remains a very important component of why informal settlements are a potential strength and a potential problem. Unfortunately, the informal settlements tend to be a little bit of a pandemics within informal settlements, because of the nature of them, tends to be to add risk to the entire community. And so the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan was a way to address the weaknesses surrounding informal settlements as they relate to a potential pandemic. So we have 9 policy areas, and each one of those policy areas has a main goal. And the concept, this is the structure of this recovery action plan. And within under each main goal for each one of those policy areas to successfully address those particular areas, such as policy area 1, including formalization, geospatial, land rights, tenure, resource allocation, and justice. So there's a main goal in addressing that policy area. Underneath that are a handful of targets. If you achieve most of those targets, then you have essentially achieved that goal. Underneath each one of those targets are a number of actions needed to achieve that target. And if you achieve most of those actions, then you've achieved that target. And then if you've achieved most of the targets, you've achieved the main goal. And so that's the concept for the structure of the Recovery Action Plan, which is actually a nice writing structure I hadn't used before. I do like this method of problem solving. Okay, Christy already talked to you about the timing, so I won't spend much time on this, but all of those individual goals are either more emergency focused or more resilience focused, and there's sort of a continuum there. And we gave an idea of where on the continuum the individual goals and targets would be, just so you know. And we also, I'll show you an example very soon about that. Okay, but first let's give you just a simple example. I didn't go through all 9 of the policy areas in this presentation. If I was just doing the wrap, I would have done that. But I'm going to give you one of the more simple ones, at least that has less targets on it anyway. Policy area 3, basic data needs, telecommunication, and information tech. The main goal of this one was that the people are empowered to cope with the pandemic by leveraging and making easily available, relevant information technologies. Now, once again, the disaster we're talking about here is the pandemic, but if you read that with without that word, the people are empowered to cope by leveraging and making easily available, relevant information technologies. Even in a situation where the pandemic isn't a major problem, the concepts are still valid. And you'll see there's 3 individual targets underneath that goal to achieve that goal essentially. So now I'm going to give you an example of what constitutes those individual targets. So in this instance, we've got 8 individual actions needed to achieve that target 3.1, and which is one of the 3 targets under that goal. As far as the timing goes, here's that example. We had red and gold circles with this one. And I actually wrote this up before we actually had circles, so I actually wrote them as red and gold circles. But anyway, those are more emergency focused, with the green and blue being the more resilience focused ones. Okay, so, and this is what it looks like one page from the book. In this particular one, I used informal constructions or formalized as the target that we're talking about, since this is a webinar on informality. And you'll note that all the way from emergency to resilience-based was the appropriate way to talk about informal constructions, because they are emergency-based and it is a long process to formalize them. So the whole range. Okay, so now a short discussion about the guidelines for formalization themselves. I will try to do this. Chrissy covered this very well. Thank you very much, Chrissy. I will try to do a little bit different focus, and we'll move on to the base structure.
We always have more details to say.
There are. I do highly recommend reading both publications. They are both, I guess I'm a little biased, but I think they're both very useful and very informative. And there's a lot of context. I think I probably could have written both in twice the depth had anybody wanted to read that much. So it was always a struggle to keep it down small. Okay, so the overall process for formalization. First section is the preparation of the strategy. In the preparation of the strategy phase, this is, it's hard to say what is there is no single most important part, but if you don't prepare your strategy correctly, there's no way your formalization process is going to work. This is where you're pulling, you're gathering political will, and if you don't have the political will, you might as well just sort of stop there and wait until you do. Beyond that, we start with the base concept of what are the informalities we're dealing with, and then how can we do a cost-benefit study to figure out what we really should do? And you could look at that cost-benefit study several different ways, and you should look at it several different ways, because there's more than one way to get to that next step, which is a fit for purpose strategy, where you've looked at the cost benefits, you've decided what should be done, you've talked to some people that are stakeholders, and you're starting to feel out what that strategy should look like. The following step of a communication plan is sort of built in once you start figuring out what that fit for purpose strategy will be, and then you put that strategy report and start getting. You've probably been getting government approval while you're doing this. So the whole strategy situation is very, very, very key to a successful outcome, and it has to really meet the challenges and work within the resources that are going to be available. So once you've got that strategy nailed down, you then move on to preparing the framework. And under the preparing the framework section, and once again, there's large sections of the actual guidelines publication that cover these in much more detail than what I'm saying now. Under the preparing the framework, what we're doing is we're getting all of the pieces together that are necessary to actually implement that strategy that we just spent X number of months working on. We are more specifically defining various categories of constructions so we can handle those individual construction informalities as groups. What are the logical groups and categories that make sense given the settlement that we're talking about in question, or the region we're talking about? So there's going to be various legal and regulatory issues that will need to be addressed. Maybe some laws need to be changed or altered. And we're preparing to make sure that we have all of the resources are available to tackle these problems before we really get started. We're defining the appropriate actions. We're setting up what is the registration process going to actually play out? What are we going to need for that? What resources? What technical support? We're drafting a specific step-by-step formalization process. The strategy was one thing, but now we have how are we actually going to accomplish it? And then we're determining which involved institutions are going to be in charge of what aspects of this, and who will take the lead on various parts, and then we start the implementation. So strategy, put together the whole concept of how and why, and gather that political will and get approvals. Preparing the framework, you put all the pieces together to get the work done. And then under the formalizing construction section, the third piece there, that's when you actually get the work done. So you're preparing the inventory in much more detail than you did before. You're really looking at the inventory in every one of these steps. But now you put that inventory list together. You accept the documents, you register your constructions, you impose legal actions if those are required, you have penalties if those are required, and you have your monetization systems as well. The last one is the actions that are done in parallel or following formalization. This is the whole concept here is we want to incorporate the informality within the broader land markets to boost the economic productivity and the social connectedness of that part of the city with the rest of the community, which helps socioeconomically both the region, the city, and those informal residents in particular. But we don't want more, once we fix the informality problem predominantly, we don't want more informality to come. So understanding, and this is covered very heavily within the publication, it's very important to know what was causing that informality, at least have a pretty good idea, and start addressing the root causes of that informality so that we don't get more informality right afterwards. Or another generation later, it's back just as bad as it was before. So looking at what those root causes are, and those actions can often be handled in parallel or following formalization, are extremely important, but it's not, the actual formalization process should not be slowed down for that, because then it might get slowed down forever. So, things along within the actions in parallel or following, working on the planning process is making them work better. These are all these are potential causes for formalization. There's a long list, but these are all potentials. Improving those land and building registers, fixing any problems within their permitting processes, making sure the land and building codes are appropriate, maybe shortening the steps and the time needed, improve the formalized housing that when there's weaknesses that are affecting health, safety, and the environment, providing upgraded utilities and infrastructure, and so forth. All of these are very important, but the process of formalization shouldn't slow down for those. They should be working in parallel or following. Okay, Chrissy already covered this slide, but this is more focused on resilience and building back better. There's no reason why resilience, and when I'm talking resilience and building back better, also addressing things like water and sanitation, energy, climate, and various other aspects of resilience can be built into the formalization process, as well as the recovery action plan being tuned toward these other things as well. All right, so here's the 9 policy areas again within the recovery action plan. I just wanted to repeat that formalization is primarily within policy area 1 and policy area 9 to a lesser extent. And the recovery action plan really covers a much broader set of SDG affecting concepts within these settlements. Lastly, I'm almost done. Adapting and tuning the ramp towards broader based solutions. I touched on this as we went along, but there's no, in a situation when the pandemic response aspects are not as acute of a problem, tuning the whole concept and of the recovery action plan towards climate or land degradation neutrality, energy, water, food sustainability. All of that's all very possible. It would take it'd probably be another publication, but it wouldn't take a big shift from what the recovery action plan is now to make it encompass or focus on these other aspects. And there might even be a way to bridge all of these together. I'm sort of thinking of 2 or 3 publications at the same time now. But the concepts, if you can follow me, are all very related and very similar. Here's the supporting materials again. There's a link there for the guidelines, the COVID-19 wrap, those policy briefs we talked about, as well as the assessment reports from various countries regarding that pandemic, COVID-19, and those training materials that all the authors worked on. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And I do apologize for some of the duplicate slides, but we were both talking heavily about the same publication. So I guess some duplication was to be expected. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think it was one presentation was complementary to the other, because I didn't focus on detail. And I think that we gave the opportunity to the participants to think better and make their questions and say what are their experiences when they implemented the guidelines and the recovery action plan, so that we understand what are some weaknesses in what we have done so far, or some gaps, and to see how we can produce more information, specific information on each part of the guidelines or on each part of the recovery action plan, because for sure we need to work more on these 2 publications in detail, I mean. So I'm very much interested to look at the questions in the questions and answers section and see what is the opinion of the participants when they tried to implement the guidelines and the recovery action plan. It is very important for us, so that we will be working this year and provide more cooperate with more experts in the various member states that they have ongoing projects, and see how we can contribute. So now I want to give the floor to Matteo, who is the moderator of the discussion that will follow, for his brief report so far. And then we will have the 2 case studies about Albania and Greece. So Matteo, the floor is yours for your remarks and for how you want to handle the question and answer section later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy. Welcome everybody, and thanks to all the presenters of this first leg of the webinar for presenting us in a comprehensive way the existing infrastructure supporting processes and projects of formalization, which, as we have seen, is one of the great challenges that we are facing in our time in the great process towards greater urban sustainability. In this second part of our webinar, we will move from this attempt to build a shared knowledge base about how to go about, as you have seen, the materials and the reflections that our excellent presenters have outlined. basically go end to end in this project, in this process of formalization, from inception, design, all the way down to monitoring, testing, and reporting. And we all know that projects have a different way of impacting with realities. So efforts of streamlining and standardizing this knowledge base, they must always take stock of concrete experiences on the ground. And this is exactly what we are going to look at in the second part. We will have two case studies this morning. One will be from the country of Albania, and the second will be from the country of Greece. So without much ado, I will give the floor now for the Albanian case studies to Doris Andoni. Doris is the former director of the Housing Policy Department of Albania, and also the former chair of the UNECE Committee on Urban Development until 2023. So Doris has a extensive, comprehensive experience in dealing with the problem and the challenges of formalization. So Doris, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matteo, for giving me the floor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. And thank you to UNECE for organizing this. Thank you to Chrissy and everyone that presented this morning, that set a scenery of very interesting and very rich with information on the topic that we are going to discuss. Now I'm going to share the screen. Can you see it?
Not yet, no. Now we can.
Okay. So I'm going today to present and later perhaps to discuss the processes of formalization of informal settlements in Albania. Very briefly, I think everybody knows where is Albania, but just to give some very quick figures on main figures about Albania. It has a population of 2.8 million, but this is based on the census of 2011. We don't have yet the census of 2023 to understand where we stand, because there has been a lot of immigration out of the country during the last 10 years. Area of the country is 28,000 square kilometers, and 70% of that is mountainous. You can see also in the picture. The capital city is Tirana, with an estimated population of 900,000 and an area of 1,600 square kilometers. After a reform that was done in 2014 from 370 something local units, now we have 61 municipalities that cover both urban and rural areas. And one of the reasons was for this territorial reform, there were many arguments and many reasons for that, but one of them was also to better manage the territory of a region, of a municipality, and not putting these divisions, strong division between cities and urban and rural areas. So, and the area of informal settlements, according to UNECE, previous UNECE, it's 200 square kilometers, which is more or less, very roughly saying, 2.4% of the lowland. The formalization for undertaking a formalization process, there is a need to understand which are the roots of the problem, and it was mentioned also by Stephen before, that we have to understand what causes the birth of informal settlements and which of these root problems can be cured. So which of them we can address, not all of them we can address, as we will see. Which is the magnitude of the problem and where it is located, where it is concentrated, Are there priority areas and groups that needs to be addressed with policies? And impact. So how this has impacted economy, social development, and environment. The root of the problems, this is now a bit old because it refers to 30 years ago, but this has been the most important root problem of informality in Albania. It was the changing of the system from centralized to market economy and removal of the legal barrier for population to move freely. So you can imagine at the time it was a flux that was looking as apocalyptic flows of people coming from remote areas towards the lowland, but mostly in the beginning concentrated in the region of Tirana and Durrës. The urbanization and also some figures in according to the census of 1989 was 38% of population living in urban areas, while in 20 years we succeeded to urbanize the population. Well, to urbanize because they were living now in most of the population, according to the census of 2011, 52% were living in urban area. Nowadays, it is estimated that 63% of the population is living in the urban areas. Other problems are the inability of central and local authorities to manage the urban growth. You can imagine all these flows of population coming in a very short period. Local government, they couldn't offer them any possibility where to build and how to build and with what standards. So the urban plans were not adopted to the new realities and to new market developments and requirements. Also bureaucracy and long procedures for building permits intersected with corruption and nowadays mostly speculations. Another root problem was the uncertainty of land ownership due to the transformation from the need to transform from central planning economy into market economy. There were adopted several laws that were, these laws were giving the right of ownership to the previous owners. In some cases, land was given to the peasants in use, not in property, but because of corrupted actions, some of them they already registered. So it was a mixture of different layers of owners, pretending owners on one piece of land. And while these were fighting inside, inside the legal, the juridical system or outside, a third group, they just found the land and built informally. Just to figure that during these three decades, there has been some 8,000, more than 8,000 murders, and between those that pretended for land ownership. So land ownership has caused quite important number of injuries and life. Which is the magnitude of the problem. According to the self-declaration of 2006, there were 270,000 self-declaration for legalization of informal settlements, and as you can imagine, 36% were concentrated in Tirana. And it was at the time in 2005, it was estimated that approximately 6 to 8 billion US dollar were estimated as a dead capital resting in these buildings and not bringing any benefits to the to those that owned or built, but also to the economy. However, this is a bit discussable, but it's not the place here to discuss. Magnitude of the problem, according to the census of 2011, buildings before 90 consisted 56%, and the difference were provided after the 90s. And according to my estimations based on different censuses of 89 and 2011, almost, I would say 90% of all these buildings has been in a form or another provided informally. The typologies of informal settlements. It is also important to understand what kind of typologies of informal settlements we are talking about, since there is perhaps there should be different approaches to different typologies of informal settlements and informal buildings. So we have almost all kind of informal developments, from illegal occupation of land, both private and state-owned, and building without permission in the outskirts of the big cities. This is done usually by migrants from rural areas and small towns. Building without permission on their own land, mostly rural inhabitants and those living in individual houses in the cities. Occupation of state-owned buildings, like ex-industrial or warehouses, student dormitory, and this has also the same subjects that have provided, like migrants and poor families living in very poor conditions in the cities. Extension, addition of existing buildings without permission, all categories. Deviation from the building permit, building informally on coastline, mostly by investors, speculators, criminals, and money laundering. Which is the approach that Albania has followed during these 3 decades. It is interesting noting that in 1 decade, so the first decade, we can identify all the approaches that are followed by the in the world since Second World War until 80s, 90s, and 2000. So in 1 decade, we tried all approaches. We started with some tentative for demolition in 94, which was rejected and also advised by international organizations. Then it was a project on site and services that started in 96. However, during the period of developing this project, the area that was identified was occupied informally, and therefore World Bank changed the aim of this project into upgrading the informal settlements. And in this period, there was also a big support by NGOs in these areas of informal settlements for raising the community awareness on their role, and also a lot of protests started at the time claiming the legalization of the buildings that they had provided in these areas. So in 2004, well, during the period 98, 2000, 2001, 2002, governments also understood that in this area there was important pool of voters. So they started also to promise for legalization. And it was also in early 2000 a program of European Union about supporting the Stability Pact of Southeast Europe, that identified informal settlements as one of the solutions for bringing more stability, social stability in the region. And they came out with the Vienna Declaration on Informal Settlements, and with some of the member states of the Western Balkans, they signed this declaration. So in 2004, also the Albanian government adopted 2 laws. One was for legalization of addition to the addition to the constructions, And the other one was on legalization and urbanization of informal settlements. However, this law was not completely or didn't succeed to be implemented, because in 2005 we had elections and the right-wing party won the elections. So they had a new policy on legalization, and I will show you the differences between the two approaches of the government based on the law on 2004 and 2006. And during all this period, informal construction continued. So according to the formal procedure of planning, it starts with planning, with land parceling, with urbanization and construction. In the case of informal settlements and the approach of the government with legislation, it starts with the legislation on formalization, on legalization. And the process of individuals starts with land occupation and construction. But in the first case of the law 2004, the proceedings were planning, urbanization and legalization. And this was more or less based on the project implemented by the World Bank in 1998, upgrading the informal settlement. So first, let's plan and at the end legalize, because it needs also to open the space, the public spaces, the road, the streets, and common areas for social purposes. While this took a long time, and politics, they want things to be done fast, so they changed the process in starting with legalization and then planning and urbanization. But this has costs associated with that, because if you need to open the roads and if you have to provide open spaces for public services and so on, you need to expropriate those that you have legalized, which is something that's happening now. So to undertake a process of formalization, first you need a law, and second you need also an institution, organization that undertakes all the processes. And in our case, it was UNECE that was established in 2006. It was established even before 2004, but as I mentioned, was not effective. So it started its operation after 2006. And in that period also, it started with declarations, self-declarations, collecting self-declarations from the informal dwellers, but also taking the aerial photo to identify the informal houses that were built up to that time. UNECE was responsible for following the whole procedures of for legalization. It is important noticing also the title of the law, which refers not only to legalization, formalization, but also to urbanization and inclusion of population. So urbanization, yeah. It was responsible for following the whole processes from accepting the declaration to the legalization, and also at the same time prepare manuals for procedure, instructions, and other forms. Here I have identified the whole steps that process of legalization was passing, and starting with the order of the director. So after the self-declaration was done, starting with the order from the general director, and after the survey on the site, several steps up to registration. With the red color, you see highlighted the most critical moments, and all these critical moments were related with the processes with the cadastral office. So the initial communication with the cadastral office was to get the information on the legal status of the land. So who owns the land? Is state-owned, is privately owned, has some legal issues, has conflicts, and so on. But this took a lot of time to get this information from cadastral office. Second one was application for registration of the legal and mortgage and deed in the records of real estate office. It also took a lot of time to get this information, although it was provided in 1 week by law, but it took a lot of time. And a request for registration of legalization permit in the cadastral. Cadastral office. So when the reform of the cadastral office was done of all territorial issues related with ownership was done in 2020, the UNECE was dissolved and was included into the cadastral office. And one of the reasons was to get more quick and fast information having the same general director, because you can have also the same information even when you are online, but you don't have this response immediately. And not all the properties are registered digitally, so that you cannot get for all the properties the information. Challenges in the process, as I mentioned, mainly problem arising from land management. The various law, different institutions have information on the legal status of property. Property maps available at the registry office differ very often. They differ from those generated by GIS, and then conflicts arise. Where is the border of the property? The lack of cadasters of address system, so information couldn't go to the interested person because of lack of address, and frequent changes of the law create confusions in responsibilities and procedures. This is to show the area of informal zones according to decree of 2015. Which is now the impact of legalization. As I mentioned, one of the typologies of informality is occupation of ex-offices or ex-state buildings. And here you can see a building of the biggest informal area, industrial site in Tirana, Usina Tractorva, that was abandoned and then was occupied by people. In 2009, there were a number of decrees of the government that was acknowledging the right of those that have occupied these buildings to privatize. So National Housing Agency was not UNECE, but National Housing Agency was responsible for managing the privatization of these buildings. And immediately when these buildings were privatized, people started to improve by their own the conditions of the houses. Municipality brought infrastructure, so water, sanitation, and the streets. However, the legalization process had also its drawbacks, because it created this security of tenure. So even if legalization didn't happen, people, they understood that they were not going to be evicted from the area. So since the early beginning in 1994, and this is a photo taken by John Driscoll at the time, that was engaged by USAID for different assistance programs. And he used to take these images from the same point of view. So in 94, there were, you can see, very few buildings and in very bad shape. So they were shacks. In 98, 2000, this is a photo taken by Sotedamo at the informal area, but the same area that is, you can see here in the I'll put the credits for the photos later on. You can see that it is the same area where the mountains in the back, and this one was again by John Driscoll, taken in 2007. You can see the transformation of the area and the number of informal buildings provided during this period, just with the announcement of the legalization process. And here you can see some informal developments that have happened in the center of the city of Tirana. This is a building here that is in front of municipality and has 7 floors, additional 7 floors. And this is a building in the coastline, in the coast of Durrës. And all what you see here in dark color is added informally. Not to mention that even number of floors here are provided during the formal construction in quoting. And this is part of speculation. So some conclusions. It is important for undertaking a formalization legalization process, the data availability to show the magnitude of the problem and the distribution in the country and concentration in areas of concentration, their processing and analysis and feedback. So they are needed for evidence-based policy. Titling only doesn't solve the problem of poor household. And this is something that I tend to say all the time when I see very much pressure on titling and legalization. Legalization will not solve the problem of lack of infrastructure, of services, of bad housing conditions. So it needs more than just legalization. It needs a legal framework and also an institutional framework set up purposely for the purpose of formalization and legalization. Legalization should not be addressed, as I mentioned, as a technical issue only for registration in the cadastral office, but it needs to be associated with regularization, upgrading, alternative housing, and emergency relocation. Urbanization and social and economic integration should be included into the agendas. Without understanding and addressing the inefficiencies of the system that feed informal settlements, better not start legalization. Otherwise, they will multiply. And this is the case in the case of Albania, that we address legalization and urbanization, but we have not addressed the issues of inefficiency in planning and managing the territory. Making a clear and transparent policy that supports legalization of housing needs. So there are these families, they build their housing because they didn't have any other option. So they are completing their housing need, but have stronger penalties for speculators. So this was my presentation, and I'm here for any question or discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doris, for this very comprehensive presentation that shows some of the critical coordinates that informal settlement problems originate from. To me, one of the key takeaways from your presentation is the importance of smooth information sharing between institutions, because the more inertia you accumulate, the more obduracy then the problem also accumulates. But maybe we'll discuss that in the Q&A. Before giving the floor to Chrissy for the case study about Greece, I would like to recommend, in the interest of time, participants to type in their questions and remarks in the chat so that we can pick them up later, and so compacting a little bit our Q&A session, since we are already running a bit late. Thank you very much. Now, Chrissy, let's see a completely different case study or one with some shared coordinates.
We all have our problems.
From Greece. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Okay. I will share you my presentation here. I hope you can see it.
We
Can you
can
see
see
it?
perfectly, Chrissy. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. So, in fact, Albania and Greece were the first who presented more holistic presentations about the procedures. So we have identified very early some of our problems and challenges and some of our progress. Anyway, I will give you something like similar about what has happened to Greece in the past and how many generations we had. Well, we can divide it in several generations of informal constructions, but here I decided to have 3 periods. One between 1920 to 1930. It was the period that we have a lot of immigrants coming from Asia Minor to Greece, and they started the first generation of informal development. Then we had the post-war period that we have urbanization in Greece, so all the areas that have been affected during the war were abandoned, and people came to the cities, to the big cities, in search of work and better living conditions. So we have the period between 1930 up to 1980. And I will explain to you more. And then we have another period after 1980 until today that we have experienced the formalization in 2 forms. So we had the first building code in Greece in 1923 and the requirement for a building permit, but already by 1955 we had the first generation of informal settlements, as I said. And then by 1968, we started demolitions to test demolitions of informal constructions, but that was against the constitution of that time. And then again, in 1974, we had demolitions to control the development of the urban areas. And in 1977, we decided to start for legalization and to ask for exemption from demolition of those informal constructions, but we already had changed the constitution, and that was again against the constitution, because now legalization and exemption from demolition was not allowed. So in 1993, they decided that we can go for formalization, but only following the planning and improvements and take care of the environment, etc. And that was going to be the last time that we asked for legalization, and never again we will ask for legalization. And since then we had the big urban regeneration projects that have been happening in Greece, and it was the law for that they had the planning law and legalization law that has lasted for so long and had so much implementation in Greece, but it was not fast, it was not fit for purpose, it was not affordable, blah blah blah. Okay, we have managed to improve several areas, and by 2003, we also provided new basic services to some areas, and electricity connections and improvements about water supply, etc. But the problem existed and still existed, and then we go to the new period from 2009 and on, where we again started talking about, little by little, about the need that we have to legalize again, because we have a lot of informalities. The more regulations you have, the more informalities you have, because we don't have such a an efficient, it is difficult to have such an efficient administration, as Doris said, in Albania, to handle with urbanization and handle with the needs and provide their urban planning beforehand, so that people can find the way to build legally and affordably, and we don't have any such efficiency in housing policy, etc. And by that time, by 2009, we also had the economic crisis in Greece. So we started saying, okay, we may legalize the specific informalities that exceed in the building permits only within the planned areas, because we knew that our constitution does not allow anything more. And that was very little, and that was not actually so necessary, because, well, of course, I don't mean that it is not necessary, but it wouldn't, I'm sorry, it wouldn't solve any problem. And because the problem was to those informal constructions that were outside of the market, that they couldn't be taxed, they couldn't be transferred, they couldn't build, the constructions were built informally, or the whole sector, development sector, was working informally. Surveyors, lawyers, notaries, it was really sad, the situation. And then they considered that it could be a way also to collect more money during the economic crisis, but it was not the right timing to collect money, because if they had started legalization earlier, they would have collected more money. Now, at that time in 2009, it was difficult to do such things. So again, in 2010, we had a new effort. It was like a massage to the whole society that we need to go for legalization. Although so far we have persuaded people that it is too bad to legalize. So we had in 2010 a new effort to legalize parts of the construction within the legal outline of the building, again, because we couldn't legalize anything that it was not within the planned areas. Because the state of the Council of the State would not accept it, because we promised that that was against the Constitution, and we are not going to do it again. Then again, in 2011, we had another attempt to try to legalize, to tackle the issue to the heart, and say, okay, we have to legalize within the planned areas, but also within the unplanned areas. Oh, Papa, that was very bad. And that was against the Constitution. So we had to think again how to overcome this problem. And in 2013, we came with another solution. We said, okay, we will legalize, but with environmental balancing measures. And that was accepted by the Council of the State, and that was not against the Constitution. And then we improved the legislation again. We came to 2017, so we legalized with some whatever we can legalize. And there, in this new version of the law, we had already some ideas about the guidelines, and we made some improvements of this law later, according to the guidelines for formalization, and I will tell you what is now the situation. As I said, with Albania, we had a joint publication about Albania and Greece. It was an early publication. You can find more details about that. It is informal urban development in Europe, experiences from Albania and Greece, published by UN Habitat. You can Google this. And also you can find the information about Albania and Greece in this publication that you see here in the bottom of the slide, formalizing the informal challenges and opportunities of informal settlements in Southeast Europe. Okay, we had the definition of the informal construction in Greece according to our law of 2012, and we have a very detailed classification about what is informal, and then we have the type of violation, what is it exactly? Is it a planning violation? Is it a construction violation, building violation, or is it, do we miss the title, or do we have the title? Usually we have the title. It is either planning or construction violation, or it can be environmental zoning violation. And also we classified chronologically according to the construction date, which is even more complicated, as I said. So this was against the guidelines. What we did, too much detail in the classification, too difficult to prove what was built then and or later, and between this year and the other year, and the air photo series that we have, they don't coincide with the years that we have classified, so it is difficult to prove. Anyway, we have some significant general positive legal improvements since 2009 as compared to the guidelines. So we have significant reduction of penalties now for the vulnerable groups and the old constructions, those built earlier. And are still pending. And we increased also the possibility that people will have more number of installments that they can pay. So this is more affordable for the people to go and declare and participate. Then we have a little bit more, it shows that the political will says that we have a little bit more flexibility for formalization within some protected lands. Although we have not managed to do much there, we did manage to solve the problem that was created in the legal titles because of the illegal subdivisions of the parcels. Although people owned the land parcel, by doing illegal subdivisions, they all became co-owners of what they have constructed, and then they couldn't sell and buy and all that. So they created big problem with the titles, but that was fortunately solved. And once they legalized, they could have individual property units that they could be sold, mortgaged, or transferred, etc., individually. That was a progress. Also, another good progress was that part of the penalty could be used for direct construction improvements and be taken out of the penalty if proved, but that measure was not very well communicated. So, yeah, I think it was not well communicated, and it is due to the lack of a comprehensive approach in land management that is missing in the country. Okay, we had the extension of the deadlines because we were very tough, and we gave people the opportunity to have an extension of deadlines to go and declare, especially because we had the economic crisis, and on top of the economic crisis, we had the COVID, and that was very difficult. So I think the momentum was very much reduced. The declaration submission could be done even if all co-owners do not agree. So that was another improvement, because at the beginning we said that all co-owners should agree, and that blocked the legalization procedure. Of course, we adopted the environmentally managing measures to partially overcome the constitution restrictions. No fixed prices are used for the private sector in order to improve, to encourage competition. That was good. Anyway, for the private sector, it was not very profitable because we require a lot of documentation, which is more or less unnecessary, but it is a lot of work for the private sector. People don't have money to pay. The whole situation increases a lot the cost. So in order to legalize and be able to transfer, the money that you will get from the selling of the property is much less than the money that you will spend in order to formalize and be able to transfer. Only sporadic controls are made for the submitted documents, which could be said that it is good because it doesn't increase the cost and the time for the public sector to do the work. Responsible for the declaration is the private sector and the owners. We don't have on-site inspections so far, which again is good because this is not affordable at all. Excellent electronic services have been provided for the submission and processing of the declarations by the Technical Chamber of Greece. That was a big success with the digitalization of the whole thing. We provide connection to services and we allow transactions and mortgages following the submission of the documents if people pay the 30% of the penalty, which again is good. And the responsible agency is the Ministry of Environment. However, we have a lot of remaining challenges. So the formalization of constructions without a building and planning permit in the unplanned areas will last only 30 years. I mean, only 30 years from the day that they submit their declaration, which is again an obstacle. It's not something that would motivate people to do that, and definitely nobody is going to be willing to buy such a property if he or she will know that in 20 years or in 15 years he will be or she will be asked to pay again a penalty, because the legislation said that new penalties will be applied after 30 years for the environmental damage recovery, because we had to do that to overcome the constitutional restrictions. Again, the constitutional restrictions are very tough, and we cannot proceed with although we have finished the forest maps, the compilation of forest maps, we cannot proceed with formalization of informal settlements that are within the forest areas yet. Once we formalize, we do not allow to have any further interventions to change the construction, unless we have problems with stability and unless we want to do energy improvements, but this is not good communicated and good motivated. Anyway, the problem of stability controls still exist, and especially, okay, we say that we allow not to have stability controls for individual houses because it is within the responsibility of the owner to know and take care of that. But when we legalize constructions that accumulate and serve many people, we must be very careful, and we should enforce stability controls. That has not been done so far. So this is a very negative thing, and we understand that we have our construction sector has good experience and all that, but still we must not underestimate the risk that especially the region has a big risk for earthquakes, etc. As I said, the deadlines and the classification according to the construction, classification of illegal constructions according to the construction date is difficult to be proved. And this causes additional delays and additional costs to the people when they have to prove in which category they fit in, their construction fits in. Then we have, as I said, this detailed documentation that we require a lot of geospatial documentation for the formalization, and the only statistics that I could find, have was from some colleagues working at the Technical Chamber of Greece that they said that by December 2019, we have about 489,440 constructions declared. We don't have any more recent statistics because since then we think that people are no more interested to submit any declaration. Not only that, the government has stopped the option for those constructions that they are built in unplanned areas that belong to category 5, which is without any permit, built without any permit in the unplanned areas. They cannot declare anymore. So this is a bad thing because I believe that there are several that they have not declared so far. Okay, we have direct construction improvements that need to be done, but they are not done because this measure is not very popular. And still there is a lack of trust and a lack of communication plan. This is very important. Lack of communication plan about the benefits and incentives, and lack of a cost-benefit study. We are not very fond of that in Greece, I think. And here I can show you some details. Here you can see the 13 regions. You can see the 13 regions of Greece, the administrative division of Greece, and you can see here that the most is in Attica region, the most declarations that we have received, and the revenue. Attica region is here, where is Athens. And after that is, I think, Central Macedonia, here. And it is also Crete, which is interesting, Crete Island, the revenue, not so much percentage of the declarations, but the revenue is big because it is very touristic place and people do more informal there, more informalities, bigger informalities. So the revenue is bigger. And also in South Aegean islands, here you can see, this is interesting, South Aegean is here, not in the North Aegean, but in the south it is more touristic, and in Crete, so we have more revenue and more applications. And you can see here also the number of applications submitted so far in thousands in blue. And you can see again Central Macedonia here, the revenue is in red, and Attica, Athens, Greater Athens region, you can see in blue the number of applications and the revenue, and in Crete and in South Aegean also you can see here. This is an interesting analysis of what we can say that we have managed so far. And here is the classification, category 1, category 2, 3, 4. Category 1 is the houses built before 1975, that will go back, and the penalty is small, of course. This is category 1. You can see here in the various regions how many applications we have, and the total it is 75,000 applications. Category 2, it is construction before 1983. As I told you, in 1980 starts the last generation of the more recent generation of informal construction. So these are before 1983. You can see here we have a total 58,000, and then category 4 is after 1983, and those where they have exceeds of the building permit less than 40% in area size and less than 20% in height. We go into more details there. You can see here we have in category 4, we have 189,000 declarations. And this could also include informal constructions also in the unplanned areas, because you have to notice here that in Greece we also allow construction in the unplanned areas under certain regulations, and maybe they have had also a building permit there to build, but they made more exceeds more than you know, those that they had less than 40% in area size and less than 20 and declared are included here. And those in category 5 that they don't have a building permit and planning permit and they build in the unplanned areas declared so far are 141,000. Yes, this is the thing, the whole thing. So even if we consider that all this part, category 4 and category 5, are the most difficult situation of unplanned, of informal construction in Greece, what we have managed to declare so far is not enough. It is little, to my opinion. Yeah, and here you can see again in a 3D representation in blue category 1, category 2 in red, and then green and yellow are those you can see here in Central Macedonia, in Attica, in Crete and South Aegean. And that is it, what I had to present about Greece so far, and I'm here for your questions. And
thank you, Chrissy.
Cooperate and how we can contribute.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. A lot of points in common, but also specificities compared with the Albanian case. We are running a little bit long, so we have space for a few questions and answers. If there is anybody in the audience who would like to begin. Otherwise, I have a couple of questions for you to break the ice. Please raise your hands if you want to speak. Okay, I will break the ice then. I have a question for you both, two questions for you both. You both touched on two topics. One is the involvement of the private sector, and Chrissy, you delve a little bit more on this, but I would like to have a comment from you both about what would be in your specific context the ideal role of the private sector in the process of formalization. And my second question is, what is the situation about information of informal settlements in your country in terms of its centralization? If there is a unified centralized database, or if the management of this information is scattered at the local level, as in many contexts. Chrissy, do you want to start first?
Well, as I said, well, because we had all these regulations, over-regulation, and all the legal issues, all the legal sector of our country did not agree that we will include the information about construction in the cadastral system, in the land administration system. So what we do in our cadastral system, we have the parcel and we have information about the property units, but we don't show the buildings there, the constructions there so far. Now what we do with the formalization is the technical chamber of Greece that they have these records about the constructions declared, those that they are legalized, formalized, okay. And so this is an interesting thing, because it is not easy to say, well, we have not done much progress, because look there are so many other constructions that they cannot be registered at the cadastre yet. So what is going on? now. So we need to do a new project here to see what is legal, what is legalized, what was legal, what is legalized now through this formalization project, and what is pending still. Because for no reason the government stopped the legalization process for category 5, as I said. So this is about the recording of the constructions, and then the role of the private sector. The ideal, well, you can never say what is the ideal way of doing things. For sure, we cannot have public employees to check and make all these controls and take the responsibility, because we have a bad experience from the past, from corruption and bribing and all these things. So, yes, I believe that the private sector should contribute and undertake the responsibility. But we have to improve the professional ethics, and we have to improve the role of the technical jumper when some bad behaviors are identified. We have not worked very well on this thing. That's why I emphasize the problem that we have a lack of a comprehensive approach in the land management sector. We have to not only to do the formalization, but we have also to coordinate all the ecosystems, as we say in WPLA, so that we can register the buildings, we can see what are still missing, we should improve the professional ethics and the private sector. We should also improve all the other topics, as Stephen was mentioning, the parallel improvements that need to be done. And yes, I agree with Doris that a formalization of titles is not going to solve the problem, but even this still is pending, because still here in Greece we cannot formalize those settlements that are within the forest lands, because the state is supposed to claim ownership over those private properties, even if these people have tenure for so long. So yes, we need to do parallel. That's why we said the value of implementing the Building Back Better projects together with the formalization in a comprehensive and holistic approach.
Thank you, Chrissy. Doris?
Yes, regarding the involvement of the private sector in the process of legalization, in our case, it is not the case, because an agency is established, the UNECE was established, and UNECE was supposed to undertake all the processes. There is the involvement, if you have noticed in one of the slides of my presentation, was about the privatization of the squatted state-owned buildings. In that case, the process of privatization is done by National Housing Agency, and the survey and information is done by private surveyors. So in our case, private sector is not involved in the process of legalization. The other question is about the location of the information. So if this information is decentralized or is centralized. In our case, it started the formalization process, legalization, started with involvement of local governments. But later on, at a certain moment, local governments were left out, and UNECE was established, and it was responsible for all the processes, also for managing the database. So today, if you ask the municipality, because I'm working with the municipalities and I'm trying to identify problems with informal developments and legalization and not legalized buildings, they don't have such information. And it's difficult, the communication between the central cadastral office where UNECE is merged with local governments. And I have also other details if you want. For example, Chrissy mentioned several times the problem with constitution. And yes, it has been in the early stages a problem with constitution, because when the law of 2006 started to be implemented and first legalization issues were certificate were issued and they were sent to cadastral office for registration, it was stopped there. Why? Because it was unconstitutional. The constitution stipulates the transactions with properties only buying and selling, renting, and donation, but not legalization. So to overpass this, the government that came in 2013, the left-wing government, they consider legalization as public interest. So the state can expropriate the owner and give the right to informal dweller to legalize and to register. So this was how it was done in our case.
Thank you, Doris. We have two concluding very quick questions from the audience, both from Paloma. Thank you. One is for Chrissy. It's a quick question. If the classification you provided is from 1983 or 1993. And the second question is for Doris. It's more articulated. And Paloma is asking, is the illegal construction related to any sector creating work positions in Tirana, which would explain the population mobility in the early 90s? It could explain the location of the illegal settlements. And your opinion is required on this. So Chrissy, first, you first, and then Doris. You're on mute, Chrissy.
The classification that I provided is how we classify now. And we classify according to the type of violation and according to the construction date. And because we wanted to give less penalties to the older constructions, but we were narrow-minded in a way how we will divide all the constructions. It is too much what we are doing, too much classification, too much division of time, and it costs a lot, this.
Thank you, Chrissy. Doris?
Yes, if I understand well the question. First, informal developments, informal construction was all done in an informality. So even the workforce was done by themselves. So they were building houses by themselves. The building materials were found in informal way. So there was not a real formal employment or generation in that sense. Secondly, yes, they were migrating towards Tirana because Tirana was the only employment possibilities. And all this, I have also written a preface in the first publication of informal settlements of UNECE. And I have mentioned that all this population living in the peripheries, they were using the informal area as a dormitory because all their activity was related to Tirana, with Tirana. So they were commuting all the day from the morning to the night when they were coming back, acting in different, being employed in different employment opportunities, mostly in construction, in services, although, well, they were not such trained in services, but even the demand for elaborated services at the time was not that high. So yes, this is the situation of why these people came to Tirana for job. Did they create job opportunity? They were mostly a supply to the labor market of Tirana that was in need at the time.
So it's largely self-built more than.
It's completely self-built. And once when I went with the students in this area and saw some people building, and we asked them, do you have a project? Do you have an engineer? And they said no. I have seen how the others has done, and now I am doing in my home for my home.
Thank you. I guess that is a pretty clear answer to the question. Okay, so we are wrapping up, and then I want to thank both our presenter as well as the presenters of the morning for providing us with a very, very rich perspective on these processes of both the origin of informal settlements and as well as some directions towards their amendment. I will conclude this morning's session here, and I recommend you join us back at 2 p.m. Vaid, is that correct? At 2 p.m. for the afternoon session to continue with the discussion and the presentations. Thank you very much and have a nice break.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Please use a different link for. Please use a different link for the afternoon session. It's not the same link. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Wahid. Yes.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
you.
See you later.
Thank you.